Channel Sports Central will be giving you guys my 2021 College Game Day location predictions for this upcoming season. And as we move closer and closer to this 2021 college football season, it's time to start looking more in depth into the games that we're going to be seeing here in this upcoming season. And basically what we're doing here today is predicting which matchup will be the most intriguing one of each week. And if you guys don't know, College Game Day is a crew that goes to most of the time the most intriguing matchup that's going to be going on in every single week. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with week 0, which is going to be Nebraska and Illinois. This game was actually supposed to be in Ireland. Of course, that was moved away due to COVID, but we're still going to be seeing Nebraska and Illinois. I'm almost 100% positive because usually College Game Day goes to a matchup that takes place just a week before the official college football season starts. So for week 0, I'm assuming it'll be Nebraska and Illinois. It could also be Hawaii and UCLA if you consider it. I mean, UCLA is in Los Angeles, so that could be a reason why they'd go there. But also Hawaii was actually a decent team last season, so we could also see Hawaii and UCLA go. But I think with this being a Power 5 matchup between Nebraska and Illinois, a Big Ten matchup, I think this is where they're going to go for week 0. Week 1 is going to be Georgia and Clemson. This is pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, you got Georgia on one side who's going to be easily a national contender next season. And same thing for Clemson. I mean, Clemson's always at the top of the ACC. They've won the ACC for 4 or 5 years straight now. So, I mean, yeah, both these teams are going to be outstanding next season for sure. And I think week 1, I mean, this is a crazy matchup in week 1, especially for Clemson. I mean, this is Clemson's toughest matchup and most important matchup of the entire regular season. And it's in week 1 for Clemson. So, I mean, this is going to be huge for both of these teams, and especially for Georgia. It'd be a huge resume builder if they can get the win here. So, massive matchup in week 1 here. First game for both these teams. It could also be Alabama and Miami, but I think it's pretty set in stone. That's going to be Georgia and Clemson just because, I mean, the Saturday night football game is already scheduled for this matchup. And that's another thing we're looking at in these predictions here today is whether or not the game will be an ESPN game or a CBS game, a Fox game, etc. Because it's more likely that the College Game Day crew is going to go to a game that is being broadcasted by ESPN, if that makes sense. So that's another factor that went into these predictions here today. But week 2 is going to be Oregon and Ohio State. This was a tough one for me, especially because you got, I mean, several matchups that easily could be ESPN matchups, which Iowa and Iowa State, that should be an ESPN matchup, and that should be a great matchup as well. I think in the end, both Iowa State and Iowa next season are going to be outstanding teams. So, I mean, that was definitely in the back of my mind for this one. But I'm going to do Oregon and Ohio State just because both these teams have been, I mean, this was a game that was really hyped up going into 2020. And even though Tyler Shuck's not with Oregon anymore, and even though Oregon might not be as good next season as they were, this should be a very intriguing matchup here between the Buckeyes and Oregon. So I think for week 2, I mean, this is going to bring a lot of great ratings as well. So this would be a great matchup. And either way, it's going to be a fun matchup. You get Ohio State and Oregon. I mean, it's going to be fun for sure. But Iowa and Iowa State, if that game was a little later in the season when Iowa could get ranked, I think that definitely could be a College Game Day matchup. Like, once again, that was probably the second most likely one for week 2 is Iowa and Iowa State, just because, once again, big rivalry matchup. Both teams are definitely going to be contenders next season. Texas and Arkansas could also be an interesting one, and I know Washington and Michigan is actually scheduled to be the Saturday night football game for week 2. So, I mean, you got 3 other matchups that easily could be. I mean, so this is a pretty tough one for me, but yeah, Washington, Michigan. Then, I mean, this Oregon and Ohio State matchup is more than likely going to be a Fox game too, so you got to consider that. But either way, still a great matchup. I think this is where it's going to be. Week 3 is going to be Alabama and Florida. And this was also somewhat a tough one just because, I mean, Alabama-Florida is going to be a CBS game. So, I mean, for ESPN, that'd be a tough get for them. But, I mean, if you look at week 3 here, you got Auburn and Penn State. That's the scheduled Saturday night football game right now. Obviously, that can still be changed. But you also got Nebraska and Oklahoma. I mean, thing is that Oklahoma's just going to completely destroy Nebraska. But then again, I mean, it's the 50th anniversary of that huge game that we saw that was named to be probably the best college football game we've ever seen. So that could be an interesting matchup to go to, even though the game might not be very good. But we also got Cincinnati and Indiana, which both of those teams should easily be top 15, I'd say, in week 3. But Alabama, Florida, I mean, this is a pretty tough matchup to go past, because you got Alabama on one side, who's going to be definitely the favorite at this point. And then Florida, of course, probably won't be as good next season as they were in 2020, but still, it is in Florida, so you got to consider it's in Gainesville. So this will definitely be an interesting matchup here. But also watch out for Auburn and Penn State, just because that will be an ESPN game. There is a chance that they do go to Penn State for that matchup. But for week number 4 now, I'm going to go with Wisconsin Notre Dame for this one, just because it is in a neutral location. It's in Chicago, Soldier Field. And there's a good chance I think College GameDay would go here just based off of that reason. Like, that's a big deal. But also, I mean, you got West Virginia, Oklahoma. That could be an interesting matchup. West Virginia next season actually looks to be pretty good. Oklahoma's going to be a national contender for sure. I just kind of threw out there Tennessee and Florida possibly. But Colorado and Arizona State could be another one if they wanted to go to a Pac-12 matchup. But this is a pretty easy one. Otherwise, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, I'm pretty positive will be week 4. Week number 5 is going to be Auburn and LSU. LSU, of course, next season I think will be just right back to being a national contender. 2020 was just one bad season for them, I really do think. I mean, this team is returning quite a bit, and they got a ton of potential as well. Auburn's also going to be a good team, Bo Nix and all. I could see them being a contender next season as well. So Auburn and LSU, great SEC matchup, should be week 5. But you also got Indiana, Penn State. I mean, if Penn State's a good team, that could be an intriguing matchup. Cincinnati, Notre Dame, don't forget about that one as well. Notre Dame, I don't really expect to be as good next season either, though. I mean, Notre Dame's going to be good, but they're not going to be quite to the levels they were last season. But still, I mean, Cincinnati's going to be a great team, so you could see that matchup as well. But then again, in week 4, we just saw Notre Dame, so I'm not sure that's going to happen in week 5. Boston College and Boston College and Clemson is also an interesting matchup if they wanted to go to Clemson, but I've got Clemson later on. So week 5 is going to be Auburn and LSU for me. Week 6 is going to be Alabama and Texas A&M, another SEC matchup. That could have major SEC implications. I mean, you got Texas A&M on one side, who's going to be definitely a good team next season, and then you got Alabama, of course, who's traveling to College Station. Could be a possible trap game there for Alabama. I mean, Texas A&M next season is definitely going to be a good team, so you got to watch out for that there. But also, I mean, you got Georgia and Auburn. That could be an intriguing matchup as well. But then again, Auburn just played in College GameDay the week before, so you also got to consider that when predicting these games. Florida State and North Carolina could be a matchup, but North Carolina, I've got them later on, and Penn State and Iowa could be another one. I mean, we've seen Iowa upset some major teams at home. We've seen that many times in the past, but then again, Penn State, I'm just not sure that they're going to be ranked all that high in week 6. So I think this is going to be our matchup, Alabama and Texas A&M. Week 7 is going to be Miami, North Carolina. Speaking of the Tar Heels, this will be a huge ACC matchup. I got the Hurricanes going to North Carolina here. This should be a huge matchup because you got, Derek King against Sam Howell, two of the best teams, or some of the best teams in the ACC here. And considering it's a great ACC matchup, you also got Florida and LSU, but they've been to the SEC, I think, the past couple of weeks. So I think Miami, North Carolina is a very likely candidate for week 7. I'm definitely pretty confident on this one. TCU and Oklahoma could also be it, but I got Oklahoma later on. So Miami, North Carolina is going to be your week number 7. Week 8 is going to be Ohio State, Indiana, major Big Ten East matchup here. You got Buckeyes, of course, who are definitely the favorite to win the Big Ten East. And then you got the underdogs, the dark horses, Indiana. This Indiana team is going to be good next season, and I don't think really people are understanding that. Michael Penix and that team is going to be for real next year. I could easily see them going right up head-to-head with Ohio State. Big thing is, Indiana doesn't have to travel to Columbus. This Indiana team has got Ohio State at home. And in week 8, this could be a huge matchup. There's a chance this will be the Fox game, the noon Fox game, but either way, still a huge matchup. You also got Oklahoma State and Iowa State if you want a Big 12 matchup. USC, Notre Dame, big rivalry matchup there. And also LSU, Ole Miss. You can't forget about that. Ole Miss could be good. But I think Ohio State and Indiana, this is a big Big 10 matchup, big divisional matchup as well. So I think week 8 is definitely going to be this matchup here because there's a chance. If Indiana knocks off Ohio State here and Indiana proceeds to the Big Ten Championship, there is a chance that the Hoosiers do get into the college football playoff next season. I'm not saying that will happen, but this matchup could be a huge one for the Hoosiers. Week 9 is going to be Florida State and Clemson. This is Clemson's College GameDay matchup, and this was a tough week to do it. You got several great matchups, several important matchups here in Week 9. You've got North Carolina, Notre Dame, of course. That is the Saturday night football game it looks like right now. Of course, that still could easily change, but so you got to take that into note. But you also got Georgia, Florida, huge divisional matchup there. I think Georgia. I mean, Georgia's probably my favorite to win the SEC East right now. But Florida, I mean, it's at Florida, so that could be a huge matchup. Thing is about that Georgia-Florida matchup, though, that is going to be a CBS matchup, so you can't forget about that. But then you got Iowa and Wisconsin as well. Iowa-Wisconsin could be a huge matchup, too. That could definitely have some big divisional implications there in the Big Ten West. So, I mean, you got several great matchups in Week 9, but I think Clemson, this is probably Clemson's most favorable matchup to get on to College GameDay at home. So, yeah, Week 9, Florida State, Clemson. I could see Florida State being pretty good next season with, of course, Mackenzie Milton coming in. That Florida State team definitely could be a dark horse next season, so you want to watch out for them. Week 10 is going to be Oregon and Washington. This was also a very tough week just because, I mean, you got several. I mean, Texas, Iowa State is going to be a huge matchup. LSU, Alabama is going to be a huge matchup. But I think the Week 10 matchup is going to be a Pac-12 matchup. You got USC and Arizona State or Oregon and Washington. I mean, College GameDay is, I mean, they got to go to a Pac-12 matchup just because, I mean, the Pac-12 is mostly on ESPN anyway. So that'll definitely be beneficial to them. But, I mean, you got two big Pac-12 matchups in Week 10. You got Oregon and Washington, huge Pac-12 North matchup. Probably the winner of this game is going to win the division. Then you got USC and Arizona State, which the winner of that game is probably going to win the South Division. So you've got two very intriguing matchups, but I think Oregon and Washington both are going to be ranked more highly than USC and Arizona State. So I'm going to go with Oregon and Washington here, but I am pretty positive, unless something happens, we will see a Pac-12 matchup in Week 10. But Texas and Iowa State is also a huge matchup. I mean, Texas is going to be good. Iowa State's going to be good. But, yeah, once again, very tough week. But I think Week 10 is going to go to the Pac-12. Week 11 is going to be Minnesota and Iowa, and this may surprise you a little bit. I mean, you got four matchups kind of the same magnitude. I mean, you got Michigan, Penn State, which could be an intriguing matchup. But then again, I mean, it's either Ohio State or Indiana who's going to win the Big Ten East. And then you got Minnesota and Iowa, which could be a big matchup in the Big Ten West. But it's, I mean, Wisconsin's probably got a good chance to win the West Division. So you're kind of in the same situation there. But I think Iowa could be a good team next season, and Minnesota, of course, as well. They were kind of down in 2020, but if Minnesota's back and playing well again, I mean, this could be a huge matchup as well. TCU and Oklahoma State could be the matchup. Miami, Florida State could also be the matchup, but I think in the end it's going to be Minnesota and Iowa. Week 12 is going to be Iowa State, Oklahoma. Massive matchup here. I mean, you got Oklahoma on one side who's right on the barrier of being in the college football playoff. I mean, this Oklahoma team is for real next season. I could see that team being in the national championship game next season. Oklahoma, I think, could break their streak of losing in the college football playoff semifinal this season. I mean, Spencer Rattler, that team is for real. But then you got Iowa State in the background here, which Iowa State is also extremely talented. They've got a huge amount of potential. I mean, this is going to be a crazy matchup, great matchup here in Week 12. I mean, yeah, it'll be pretty insane. It's more than likely going to be Oklahoma and Iowa State a couple weeks later then in the Big 12 championship game. But either way, huge matchup here. There also is a chance that we see SMU and Cincinnati. I mean, if College GameDay wants to go to a Group of 5 game or a game outside of the Power 5, it could be SMU and Cincinnati. But the thing is here is that, I mean, if they're going to go to a Group of 5 or an FCS matchup, it might be either Week 11 or Week 10. So, I mean, who knows? It could be one of those weeks. But Week 12 is going to be Iowa State and Oklahoma. I'm pretty confident on this one. Unless Washington and Colorado suddenly is a great matchup. Like, Colorado actually could be a good team next season as well. So watch out for them. Week 13, rivalry week, is going to be Alabama and Auburn. Iron Bowl matchup. I mean, it's going to be tough to go against this one here. And this is the third time that Alabama's been on game day, or that I'm predicting them to be on game day. But only thing is, I mean, Alabama's not going to have it in Tuscaloosa this season, but this will be great enough of a matchup for it to counter that. I mean, you got Alabama and Auburn both, who are going to be good teams next season for sure. I mean, Alabama's going to probably be 11-1 or undefeated at this point. And then Auburn, of course, should be a 9-win team, I'd say, coming into this matchup, which this will be huge because it's in Auburn, and we've seen some crazy things in the Iron Bowl happen in Auburn before, so you can't forget about that. But you also got Texas A&M and LSU. That could be an interesting one. If Minnesota's really good, we could see the division championship between Wisconsin and Minnesota. And then we also got Ohio State and Michigan, the game which is always, I mean, Ohio State's had a lot of success in that game in the past, but it's always one of the best rivalries in all of college football, so you got that game as well. But Alabama and Auburn, I think, is going to be your matchup. I mean, especially if ESPN can get their hands on this game and Texas A&M and LSU goes to CBS, this would be huge for ESPN, and I think that it's pretty much a no-brainer for them to go to Auburn for this matchup here. But that being said, there are some of my College Game Day location predictions. I won't be predicting the conference championship week just because, I mean, it's so unpredictable past that point. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on these. Let me know your predictions as well on the locations. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. If you disagree with anything here, I'd also like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Then again, I appreciate you guys all watching. If you enjoyed the video, slap a like on it, subscribe as well, as it does help out the channel. But once again, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys all later.